Okay, we have Amy and Claire still coming back. All right, and I pressed the record. So uh, please, somebody remind me next every time in the beginning of class. Just say, "Hey, Chris, record." Okay. All right. Give me some feedback. How are your threes and fours? I know the keyboard is not ideal because it speaks late, right? Because so it causes a little bit of latency, so that you have to really kind of maybe even slow down the pulse so that it can actually you can play without causing a reaction, right? So when you play the notes on the physical keyboard or on the virtual keyboard, you have to make sure you're not causing the other person to have a reaction mistake, right? So what we're trying to do is have as flowing, without tension, a free flowing sense of pulse, right? One, two, and one and two and we name the interval on the offbeat, on the end of each beat. Okay, right? But what you don't want to do is one, two, one, one. So if you do it play in that manner, then you're going to cause a reaction in your partner, right? So you want to try to provide as flowing a manner. And what's actually wonderful about this is when you practice doing these in the first stages, just being able to play threes and fours fluently on the piano yourself, right? So even though you're playing and you know what you're playing, right? You're actually training your brain to identify those threes and fours as you practice playing them. Does that make sense? Right? Because if you're not used to playing them, then just the physical act of playing threes and fours can be challenging, right? Figuring out, okay, and then you might do a pattern sort of after doing just playing it randomly. Now you might try to throw off your partner by setting up a pattern where you play 3, 4, 3, 4, and then next pattern you go 4, 3, 4, 3, right? Or you might play 3, 3, 4, 4, 3, 3, 4, 4, and then 4, 4, 3, 3, 4, 4, 3, 3, or 3, 3, 3, 4, 3, 3, 3, 4, and then 3, 3, 3, 3. Right? So then you're just setting up this pattern and then training your brain to perceive when there are pattern changes, right? And what's amazing about our brain is our brain loves pattern, right? It tries to find pattern in chaos. In nature, that's how it is. Nature adores and is very comfortable with chaos. A tree grows without a pattern, right? If you ever look at a tree and the branches go out, there is no pattern. It's chaos pattern. That's the pattern, right? But human beings adore pattern. So when we draw a tree, we try to draw a tree that has pattern, and that it's almost impossible for us to draw a tree branch that is not chaos, right? Or that is chaos, right? So in many ways, when you are studying a composer, when you're studying a piece of music, it's actually you're learning a pattern that this composer have laid down, right? With a set of intervals, with a set of harmony, with a set of notes, right? They have set up a pattern that is recognized as a piece of music, right? And every piece will have a micro scale pattern and a macro scale pattern, right? Happy Birthday has a pattern, right? Because that's how we are able to absorb that random chaotic set of notes. Because if you just have a random chaotic set of notes, it's really hard to decipher that as a piece of music, right? John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds is at the way other end of the spectrum, where he is celebrating ambient noise of a concert hall as being music, right? Where he has left everything to chance, taken himself out of the equation, his ego out of the equation, his ego as a composer out of the equation, where he dictates every note, every harmony, everything. But he didn't want to do that. He just wanted to throw all that out. And the ambient music of the concert hall, whether it be people sort of getting more and more uncomfortable through the tacit 3 movements of 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And that is, for him, what he defined as a piece of music, right? So many of his pieces explore this idea of chance operation and aleatoric music, where he has set up a set of rules where he has given specific indications and directions to the performer to play the piece, but he has taken himself out of the equation by not choosing which note or what instrument or things like that. Okay, but that's for another time. Okay, one thing I'm going to do today, I hope I can get to everything because I seem to be constantly running out of time to do all the things that I want to do. There are three things that I want to try to accomplish today. I want to try to introduce the open score concept of score reading using a Bacquerel. And then I also want to do some conducting of the foray, where everybody's going to conduct the foray for each other and for us. I want to preview a little bit of the Brahms Requiem coming up. And then I want to also get to the adoration because I want to see you conduct that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Bacquerel. So one of the links I'm going to show you is actually, I was in the midst of writing down my lesson plan, but this website really had a beautiful way of collating all the information that I actually wanted to collate. So I'm just going to use it. Okay. So one of the most important thing about open box score readings is it gives you this ability to transpose all the instruments. Soprano clef, alto clef, tenor clef, bass clef, mezzo soprano clef, baritone clef, all have their corresponding instruments. So alto clef or viola, which is the violas used, alto trombone, and any D transpositions, right? Tenor clef is very useful for cellists, bassoonists, tenor trombone, because they'll actually see it in their parts, but also for B flat transpositions, right? Bass clef, you basically use for E flat transpositions, right? And soprano clef, A transposition, so sometimes we'll see an A clarinet part in a score, right? So actually in the Bacquerel scores, we're going to be focused on these four clefs: soprano clef, alto clef, tenor clef, and bass clef, right? So when I say there are corresponding transposition, does everybody understand what that means? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, so let me further explain. Okay, so let me share the screen with you, because this is a concept that's a little bit difficult to understand if you're not used to it. Okay, and please, wait a minute. Why is my iPad frozen? There we go. Okay, so when I say an open score Bacquerel, open score versus closed score, what you see on the screen is an open score. So the soprano clef is there on the top, and the alto clef is here. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, this is a very kind open score. Oh, shoot, I should have checked. Okay. All right, let me find a different example. Sorry, I had just assumed that. Okay, so what you were seeing on the screen before. Okay, let me go back and share this page. Okay. So you just saw this, where you had 3 treble clefs, tenor clef, and octave lower, and bass clef, right? So that's one version, because to sing it helps choirs sing it, because most modern choirs do not read soprano clef, right? So what they've done is translated the open score so that modern choirs who don't have the ability to read open scores can just read it. So the sopranos would read this line, the altos would read this line, tenors would read this line, bass would read this line, right? So all you have to know really is to be able to decipher treble clef and bass clef. And this would be an example of a closed score. So many Bacquerels exist in this fashion because the study of open score Bach chorale reading has really gone out of fashion, right? So most organists do not read open scores. They read a closed score like this, right? So then you just have to learn two clefs, treble clef and bass clef. Now, the original Bach clef, open clefs are in this way. So it translates to this way. So soprano clef. Oh, what happened? I didn't want to do that. No. Stop that. What? What is wrong with this page? Okay. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay. So I'm going to annotate. The soprano clef is there, right? So basically the C is on the treble clef E or the bass clef G, right? So this G translates to from C, 1, do, re, mi, fa, sol, right? So that G is same as this G. Okay. In alto clef, the C, the middle C is here, and it's indicated by this, that it points to where the C is. So this note is what note? That's a D, this D, right? Because the middle C is here, and the middle C is here for the soprano clef, right? And in tenor clef, the C is on this line, right? So this is a B, this note, right? And of course, the middle C is here, right? And then of course, bass clef stays the same G. And then of course, for bass clef, C is here. Is that clear? Right? So now what happens is when you have a soprano clef like this, right? Right? So for example, in alto clef, right? And I'll go back to the screen that we just saw that lays this out. And I'll send you this link. Alto clef, you use for D transpositions, right? So you may have to change the keys in some cases. So for example, what does it mean to have an instrument in D transposition, right? That means when you play a, let me go back to the screen. So on a, let's say it's a D trumpet, okay? Everything they see, they play because it's already a transposed part. So if they play a C on their D instrument key, right? What note are they going to sound if they play a C?
D.
Exactly, right?
It's
so
like saxophones that are like transposed into
exactly. So E flat saxophone, if you play a C, it sounds an E flat. A B flat trumpet, if you play a C, it sounds a B flat. F horn, if you play a C, it sounds an F, right? So it gives you the ability to transpose and read at sight what the actual notes is, right? So imagine if you're reading an open score like this, right? You have to kind of translate to what it looks like over here, right? Does that make sense? Right? Because an orchestral score can be in it can be on score in C, which means all the notes are actually it's at a sounding pitch like this. So a B flat trumpet part, an E flat saxophone part, F horn part have all been transposed, not what the players see, but what it, if you play that C on the keyboard, it'll play a C. So instead of a transposed part, it'll have the score is in C. But if it's a transposed score, that means all the transposing instruments are in their own transposed key, meaning you see what the musicians see on the page, right? So there has this been this tradition of now. If I have to start things over, I probably would have asked everything to be in C. And in fact, that's what I prefer, because when I'm studying a score, I don't want to go through the process of transposing the different parts to figure out what the chord is, right? Because it's just less complicated to know what it's supposed to sound like if everything's in C without having to transpose. The problem is most orchestral scores retain the transposed parts. So you see what the player see. So a French horn part in F is what you see, the same as the horn player part looks the same in the score. So you as a conductor have to do that translation of, okay, that note is actually this note in the key of C, or whatever the key you want. Okay. Now, why is that? All right. There's a number of reasons. Historically, traditionally, composers have just learned that system. Well, they didn't want to deal with write the score in C and then translate all the parts into the right key combination, and then produce a different part that looks different. So they just want to make it easy, right? So they wrote the whole score in a transposed key, and then they have to give it to the copyist, and copyist just copies the same horn part in F, trumpet part in B flat, and whatever, right? So that just became a added on tradition, right? So unfortunately for us conductors, that's just part of the deal, where you gotta learn how to transpose pretty much at sight, right? And I've learned enough scores where I actually feel more comfortable knowing. So, for example, a French horn part in F. If I see a C transposed score, it actually confuses me a little bit for a split second, because I have a physical reaction to a high G on a horn part in F, because I know what that feels like. I know what it should sound like. I have this imprint in my mind's ear of what that's supposed to sound like and how that is supposed to feel to the horn player. But when I see that down a fifth, and I go, what? So there's a momentarily disconnect, because I'm so used to seeing the transposed part in my score, right? So you can see how people, this is like classical music in a nutshell. Like people who already learned that really complicated, irrationally system, they perpetuate that system because that's what they're used to, right? And a new person who comes to the scene is like, why are you doing it this way? This is so complicated. Why don't we just have a C score, and then that's what we learn? But so this, in a way, is a perfect example of all the things that classical music does to sort of make that early learning curve difficult, so that most people say, I don't know what this means. So how wonderful would it be if scores could be readily accessible to the general public, where they can all look at the score and understand what's happening, right? But there are many different ways, many layers, historically, traditionally, they've put on. And transposition is one of the ways where we are dealing with this incongruency between what the players see and what the conductor sees. So if you're a composer, you're in a sort of a quandary, because, well, can I just put a score in C? And then some conductors are, can I actually have a transposed score? Because I want to see what the players are seeing, right? So then I have many composers who actually think about the piece and configure the piece, and they want to be able to hear the piece. And having a transposed score is actually a hindrance to them, and they produce a score in C, right? And so sometimes when because I do a lot of contemporary music, now I see a lot of scores that are in C and that are not transposed, right? The problem is often more often than not, especially if a composer is inexperienced, they'll make a transposition mistake when they generate a part. So then you have to kind of deal with that issue, right? So this is way bigger involved conversation, but the open Bach chorales help you with the transpositions, but it also helps you track horizontal note relationship and vertical note relationships. Okay, so let me go to, for the sake, I think it's okay for us to work with both kinds of scores. And in fact, because I had not realized that the score PDF that I uploaded onto the file section of the Canvas, it's actually the translated open score for modern choirs, where it's just in treble clef and bass clef. But I think for our purposes, it's totally okay to work with that score. Okay, and if you're further interested, and you can go further, but I think for our purposes, this score is totally fine to use. So let me go back to the iPad screen where we can see the open score. Okay, now what we want you to do is, in your practice, be able to track different lines. Okay, so just as we're doing the dichord exercises, the exercise you're doing with the open back chorale sight reading is that, and I'll make it a little bit easier. What you can do is, can you guys still hear me if I play that now? Give me a thumbs up. Good. Okay. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just play the top soprano line. Okay, here we go. Could you hear that? Yes? Okay. Now what you would do is you would track in your mind's ear, all right? Maybe just start with the opening pitch of E major. And then you sing in your mind's ear. Oh, wait a minute.
Wait, Professor?
My bad. I'm playing a different version.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Sorry. Okay. I thought this was. I'm so sorry. I thought so. I have the Riemann Schneider, and I was playing the number one from this book, and I figured it was the same number one. It is not the same number one. You know what? Okay, let me redo this. I will send the correct score onto the file. I'll delete this file and send you the correct file. But the exercise that I want you to do is, you can give yourself the first chord, okay, and then without playing it, you try to sing the soprano part only until the second fermata. Okay, and then you do the same thing with the alto part, and then you do the same thing with the tenor part. And then you do the same thing with the bass part, right? And then what you do is, after you've sang the individual part without playing it on the piano, when you get to the final, the second fermata note, you check if you got the right note, right? So what you're doing is you're tracking in your mind's ear on the physical keyboard as if you're playing the keyboard, but tracking each line, okay? Now, I could do this in a similar way with dichords, where I say to you, starting from A, imagine the A on the keyboard, okay? And we're just gonna ones and twos, okay? I'll do it in slow motion, so we can I'll do maybe 8 intervals, okay? Starting from A below middle C, up a 1, down a 1, down a 2. What note is that? Starting from A, up a 1, down a 1, down a 2.
So G sharp.
G sharp. Okay, I'll make it harder. I'm gonna do 6 notes from A. Up a 2, up a 1, up a 1, up a 2, up a 1.
E.
E, excellent. Okay, I'm gonna do another one from A. Ready? From A. Up a 2, up a 2, up a 2, up a 2.
F.
Very good. Okay, so now what you're doing is, ones are going to be easier to track, correct? right?
Yeah.
If you just have a set of twos, that's going to be easier to track than mixing up ones and twos, right? If you have changing directions, that's going to be even harder. If I go up and down, up and down, up and down, that's going to be harder, right? Okay, so in a similar way, with each of the Baccarat lines, you're tracking on the keyboard and then trying to hear it in your head, right? So with the solfege, the Dandolo exercises, the pitch is less important. But in here, what you really want to do is actually try to hear the right note when you get to the end of the second fermata. Okay, so let's try it. Well, actually, I'll just give you the C sharp. Here's the C sharp. We're tracking the soprano line. All right. Let's conduct and sing it in our mind's ear without vocalizing. Ready? Give me the first pitch. Do you have it? Here we go. Ready? 2, 3. Sing the pitch, the fermata. Okay. All right. So in this way, what we're doing is we are learning to make our inner ear stronger. Okay. And then you would do the same thing. You know, so if you are a tuba player or a cellist, you're used to the bass clef, you start with the bass clef. If you're a violinist or a flutist, you start with the soprano clef or the soprano line. All right. And then gradually you move to lines that you're unfamiliar with. Okay. So at any given point, you should be doing this exercise so that you're making about 3 mistakes. If you're making more than 3 mistakes, it's too hard. Then you have to make it a little easier. You have to just maybe focus on the first fermata, all right? Or a line that doesn't have a lot of movement. So often the inner lines just move by steps. Like the tenor part often moves just by steps. All right, so it's usually easier to sing in your inner ear. Okay, so remember, you're giving yourself the first chord, and then imagining the line going through the first fermata, and then you check the fermata note that you're supposed to have gotten to. Okay, all right. So try that this week until Monday, and report back of how that goes. All right. Yeah, try it with this number 1. Just going to the second fermata, and then try imagining the line, giving yourself the first pitch and then the last pitch. But you have to imagine without singing, without playing it on the piano, all 4 parts. Okay. If somehow you're able to do all 4 parts without a problem, without making any mistakes, then the next added challenge is you would sing one line while playing another line. Okay, so you would sing the soprano line while playing the alto line, for example. All right, that's actually the easiest is actually playing the bass line and singing one of the upper lines because we're used to hearing the bass. Okay, and you get a better context of the harmony. All right, and easier pairings are soprano alto and tenor bass or soprano bass. Okay, all right. This is a progressively difficult exercise. If you're making no mistakes, then you add an element that makes it more challenging. So let's say, you know what? I can play the alto part while singing the soprano part without a problem. Okay, then you add 2 voices to play. You play the alto and tenor, or alto and bass, and then you sing the soprano. And so on. Okay, so that the idea is you're putting your brain through the same set of exercises we do with a solfege, right? You're trying to put yourself in a situation where you're making about 3 mistakes, right? You're scanning for about 15 seconds before you perform. Where will I make a mistake? Okay, and then while you're playing, without stopping, without reacting, without making the three kinds of mistake, you perform. And if you make a mistake, okay, that happened, but move on. After you're finished, you look back and say, okay, what happened? Where did the orchestra make a mistake? Where did I make a mistake? What is the cue? How can I fix that? All right, what are my tendencies? Oh, I have trouble deciphering fourths. Or when there's a voice crossing, I get confused. Or when there is a descending interval, like descending thirds, it's more difficult than ascending thirds for me. All right, so you start to identify your tendency of how you perceive musical information. For most people, stepwise is really easy. Going upward is easier than descending. Okay, so these are designed to help you try to figure out what your tendencies are. Does that make sense? Okay, all right. So in your own words, tell me what you're supposed to do with this exercise.
So start with the first layer, the easiest one, where you're trying to hear the music of one line in your mind's eye, or mind's ear, rather.
Mind's ear.
And then once you don't make mistakes checking against the keyboard with like the last fermata note, then you start adding on different parts. And then once you get really good at it, you start playing one part and then doing the exercise with another part.
Let me just add one more caution. If you cheat and you play the melody before you hear it, you just took the opportunity for your brain to really learn it. Because then you're just going to the old way of, I'm just remembering the happy birthday song. You're not really tracking, right? Because it's two different things. So the immediate, because I did this and it hindered my progress. Okay, in the beginning, it's gonna feel like this is impossible. How am I supposed to hear this without playing it first, right? So you have to really imagine the physical keyboard in your mind's eye, and then hear it in your mind's ear as well, right? But if you go ahead and play the soprano line and then sing it, you just skip that process of allowing your brain to create a physical picture both for your ear and for your eye. Does that make sense? Right? Because immediately you're going to want to just play it so that you can know what it sounds like. Okay, then I can sing it. But then you just skipped that muscle building process of allowing your brain to develop the skill to be able to hear the piece, hear that line in your inner ear, in your mind's ear. This is really, really important. If you skip and cheat and go ahead, then you'll be stuck in that stage for a longer period of time, right? This is about developing your inner muscle, inner hearing, right? Not just repeating back a melody that you already know. Okay, this is really, really crucial. Yeah, you're allowed the first chord, okay, and you have to find that note out of that chord. You can't even voice it, okay? And then hear that line in your inner ear, not sing it, okay? Because some of you have the sight reading ability to actually sing it correctly. Okay, that is not what we're practicing here. That's a later exercise. Okay, we're exercising our inner ear, ability to make the imagination work so that you can hear the piece in your head, right? So when Beethoven writes about walking in the woods, like hearing the piece, and then he writes that, that's what we're trying to practice. Okay, all right, because that ability is absolutely crucial in being able to look at a score and imagine the piece in our head. Okay, there is a physical limitation to singing each line, playing each line, right? I'm not a great pianist. I'm not a great singer. So if I just rely on the physical limitation of being able to sing something, physical limitation of being able to play all the lines, there's going to come a wall that I can't get over, right? So this ability to develop your inner ear will pay huge dividends, right? So in the beginning, it's going to be really frustrating because you're like, oh yeah, I don't even know where I'm wrong. Okay, all right. So the dichords are going to help you being able to know what the interval process is, right? So it may look like when you're doing that preview portion of the exercise, all right, let's look at the intervals. Is this a major second or minor third? What is the interval that's moving up, right? And then you can imagine the dichords, the different dichords, the minor third, minor second, right? And you're building that inner hearing of what a dichord, what the ones and twos sounds like, what the threes and fours sound like, and then 5, 6, 7s look like. So what's kind of amazing is all of these exercises are in a way threaded together. So as you get better in one skill, the Bach chorales get easier as your dichord skill improves, right? And as you get better in your solfege reading, your dichord skill get better because in your solfege reading, you're imagining the keyboard as you say the solfege, right? So as you imagine the keyboard and your ability to imagine the keyboard improves and physically hear and track the notes on the keyboard, right? And do the exercise, just give yourselves a series of arrows and numbers, right? Ones and twos and arrows up and down, right? And start with an A or C and then track, go up and down, up and down, up and down. And then, is that the note? Right? And then you look back and say, yes, okay, I was off by 1 or whatever, right? That process will improve your inner hearing, right? So it took a while for me to go through this system as I was learning, taking lessons with Marion Ploger. And I was like, I don't understand why I'm doing this. This just seems like busy work. But then as I started to improve, and then as I started to actually listen to her rather than cheating and just playing and then memorizing what that sounded like, right? There was a moment where everything started to click together, and then this threading wasn't quite catching for a while, but then it started to kind of click and catch. And I was like, oh, holy cow. And then my ability to hear things in my inner ear improved in such a manner, I started to interact with music in a completely different way, right? Even the dichords, that tendency of contraction versus expansion, right? And how composers, especially Bach, uses that feeling. It's just kind of amazing. Okay, so this first step of trying to imagine a single line through 2 fermatas in your inner ear, it is a really crucial exercise. I would recommend doing 2 minutes, but laser focused 2 minutes in the morning and evening. And if you do that for 5 days, you will see a difference. You'll hear a difference. Okay, if you cheat and play the melody, then you are not going to hear the difference. Okay, do you have enough information to practice for until Monday on this? Yes. So don't worry about playing a secondary line, even if you can. Okay, just keep working on being able to hear. Play the first chord, imagine the piece, check the pitch at the second fermata. All right, you might have to do just first fermata for a while. Okay, and let me know how that goes. And then make some notes as you do it. Okay, just jot down, you know what, I couldn't hear anything today. Or today, I actually got 2 out of 3. You know, just make some kind of notes. Okay, all right, enough on that. Now let's go to the 11:16. Okay, let's go to the 4A. Can you give me a thumbs up that you can actually hear the excerpt when I play it? I'm going to play it now. Okay, all right, I got to go back and I think I didn't check the, I didn't check the share computer sound. Okay, there we go. All right, and then share screen. Is it large enough for you to see the score? Okay, all right. And then now you should be able to, no, that's the wrong excerpt. Thumbs up, yes? Okay. All right, who wants to go first? Actually, before we have a, let's have a group conducting session where we're gonna follow the score. All right, now, two things we're gonna work on. What are they in this excerpt?
Well, we said last time, like
Mm-hmm.
making sure like with the long lines not to slow down, and then also keeping track of the 16th notes underneath.
Exactly. The very first layer is making sure we have a kind of beat that accommodates both the 16th notes and the choral long dotted quarter melody figure, right? Number two, we're trying to emphasize beat two because beat two is very important in this piece, right? So instead of beat 1 and 3 as in the Bach Brandenburg, we're emphasizing 2, 3, 1, 2, da, dee, da, right? Okay, here we go. I'm gonna go to gallery view so I can see everybody. Okay, step away from the screen a little bit so I can see your upper torso. Okay, here we go. Two, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1. Maybe use your left hand for the crescendo coming out. 1, 2, 3, and forte. Diminuendo. 2, 3. Stay soft. Try using the left hand for the crescendo coming up. 2 bars of crescendo. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Forte. And then diminuendo. Piano. Hear the 16th notes in your head? Keep that 16th notes. 2 and bass pizzicato, boom, bass harp. Okay, so 2 things. one of the things that is really, really difficult to do at the end, this rallentandi is really not indicated literally as a rallentando, right? But all things indicated because of the triple P, right? It's the end of the piece. The harmonic rhythm is basically stable and stasis, right? We've arrived at one, back to the home key, right? And then there's the last 3 bars of boom, 2, 3, boom, 2, 3, boom. And then they even do this boom, 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 because it's harp and bass that are basically playing these last set of notes, right? So I don't think I've ever found a performance or recording where they don't do a rallentandi. They don't slow down, where they just go 2, 3, bum, 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 2, 3, bum, 2, 3, bum. That would be insensitive, I think, right? So I think there's an implied suggestion in the music that you do a little bit of slowing down, right? It's just a matter of taste, how much people do, right? Some people do a lot in this particular recording. They do quite a bit in the last bit, and then even break up the harp part. So that's sort of an example of a subjective interpretation choice that people are making, right? I think one of the things that's difficult in conducting is the score represents a partial realization of what the composer's intention, right? So somebody like Mahler will put in so many directions on top of the music, right, that you have a better sense of what his intention is, right? Because he didn't trust orchestras and conductors. He was a conductor himself, and he was a conductor of the New York Philharmonic. So he knew that if left to their own devices, many conductors, many musicians would willfully ignore the music and sort of make up their own thing, right? So he's a case in which he over prescribes the direction to the musicians so that they're kind of boxed in terms of their interpretation. And it was his way of defending his music, because he had so many experiences where musicians just got it wrong, or their subjective choice was way too much. So it's a manner in which his experience as a conductor influenced the way he wrote down instructions as a composer, right? So Fauré was less stressed out about his instructions to the performers, right? So in this case, he assumed and kind of left it more open, right? I think Brahms is an example where, just in terms of metronome marking, he is less likely to give you a specific metronome marking. So in the next example, for example, right? I stopped sharing, didn't I? I wish there was just really quick button, but anyway. So in the, if you look at the tempo marking, right? Das Heimlich langsam und mit Ausdruck. Sorry for my German. Basically translates as moderately slow with expression. So instead of giving a specific metronome marking, like Beethoven would have done, or somebody else of his era, Brahms really left it a little bit more open to interpretation in terms of tempo markings. And I would challenge you to see if you can find a piece by Brahms where he gives you a specific metronome marking. I've never seen one, right? Whereas Mahler, very specific tempo markings. Beethoven, very specific tempo markings, right? But Brahms tends to give very specific tempo marking in terms of expressive description, like he has done in the Requiem. But he doesn't subscribe to giving very specific metronome number, right? So then you have to be able to interpret what kind of tempo markings you would choose, right? And so a number of factors come into play. All right. As we conducted the Fauré, what are some of the things that you were encountering? Now, I was kind of talking over you like a swim coach, so I apologize for that. But I was trying to get you to use your left hand with a little bit more independence, because I saw quite a bit of mirroring a lot of people, right? And then I also saw some people really trying to stay with just one hand, which is great. But in certain places, I would like you to start to explore using your left hand and growing your independence of left hand, right? So one exercise you could do because one thing we have to do is we have to get used to our patterns, right? So everybody do a 3 pattern. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2 pattern, and 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 4 pattern, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 3 pattern, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2 pattern, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 4 pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, continue the slow 4 pattern. And then we're going to involve our left hand. We're going to do a 1 bar crescendo and then a 1 bar decrescendo. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 bar crescendo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Oh, I'm running out of room. 4. So pace the 2 bars. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So sometimes you get like 4 bars or 8 bars, or sometimes Mahler has said crescendo to the end for like 95 bars, right? So sometimes often people talk about music and architecture having a corollary, right? I think all composers who are worth their salt, they use dynamics as a structural event, right? So all composers who are really thinking about music as a structure, they're thinking about the loudest point in the music and the softest point, right? And if they're not, then the architecture of the piece really kind of falls down, right? So think about any significant piece of art or a musical play or a movie. Okay, let's think about a movie. Okay, if there isn't a point at which there is the greatest point of tension, or it's the climax, right? Then it's sort of, and this is my problem with Marvel movies, because it just sort of feels like it's at like fortissimo all the time, right? And there might be a few like pianissimo moments, but I can't tell when the climax is. It's just like, so if you want to argue with me about that, I'll go to bat with you. But I think what that does when you have sort of this all the time, it robs this sense of journey through achieving that point of the most important point, and that journey coming back home from that, right? I think that is the most natural way we tend to think about a story, right? So I think in music, I find, and when a piece does that, that makes sense to me, right? But when a piece does this Marvel movie thing where I don't know what the climax, I can't make sense of the architecture of the piece, then it doesn't really work for me. But when something is really moving is when there is this. Let me tell you a short story. I was very early in my career. I was the assistant conductor of the Louisiana Philharmonic, and one of the pieces that terrified me was Bruckner Symphony No. 7 that was on the symphony season, and I knew I had to be the cover conductor, meaning I may be asked to step in if a main conductor who's conducting gets sick or misses a plane or whatever. So I really had no experience conducting Bruckner at that point. And so I spent a big part of the summer really studying the piece. So I wanted to get a handle on the piece. And of course, November rolls around when it was the Bruckner 7 week. And Tuesday morning at 8:30, I get a call from the personnel manager. It's like, well, the music director missed his plane in Frankfurt, so you're up for the first rehearsal on Bruckner 7. You ready? And I said, yeah, sure. So I get in front of the orchestra and I said, I apologize in advance for all the mistakes I made because Franz Peter and I did not talk about like how to conduct the piece. So I'll probably make a lot of mistakes. So bear with me, but we do have to read it so we're ready for this week's concert. So I went through the piece, read the whole thing, and I got through it. And then the conductor arrived later that evening. And then the next morning, he was conducting. And I realized I had made every decision opposite. So like I was in 2, and then he was in 4. And then I was in 4, and then he's in 2. And then I slowed down, he sped up. And it's just crazy. So, but basically, after that, he said, come here, Chris. I think we need to have lessons on the pieces you're covering. I was like, yes, I agree. So, so at that point in my career and my development as a conductor, I would mark everything. I would mark dynamics in blue. I would mark entrances in red. I would have phrases in yellow, primary line in green, secondary line in orange. I mean, it was like a color book, my score, right? So the first thing Franz Peter said, what the hell is this? This looks like a coloring book. Are you actually even reading the music? I said, I mean, that's somebody taught me that, so that's what I'm doing. And so, well, can I look at your score? I was like, sure. So he hands me his Bruckner 7 score, and there's nothing, no marking anywhere, right? And I'm just flipping through the pages, like thinking, wait, there's no marking. Wait, there's nothing. And then I found a marking in one place. I was like, so it was just like a line, like with a pencil, and very, very light. It was like just like arrow down. I was like, so what does that mean? He was like, well, that's the point of furthest from home. Okay. And so at that point, I was like, all right, this guy's crazy. It's like, that's the only thing marks. But the point being, for him, that's how he studied the score. Like he studied the score to the point where he just needed one information. Where is the point of the most important? That is the point he marked, right? Everything is going to that point, and then it's coming away from that point, right? So now, why did I go on that whole rant about this? Because as we think about gestures, right? And remember, when we did the 2-bar crescendo, I ran out of room, right? Right? So how we conduct has to be related to the architecture of the structure of the piece. Because if we're doing a piece where the composer is thinking about architecture, where they are using dynamics as a structural point, then there are going to be points where this is the loudest point and this is the softest point. So to convey that, our gesture and size of proportion of beats has to convey all of that as well. Does that make sense? All right. So as I asked you to involve the left hand, think about 1 or 2 places that you'll really emphasize and that this is important, right? So think about a larger scheme of gestures where this doesn't happen every bar, right? So after a while, if this happens every bar, right, in trying to emphasize 2 or whatever idea we're trying to emphasize, if that particular gesture is so big, but it's repeatedly big, that the context of architectural shape disappears from the picture, then, right, so it's another way you have to think about a large set of tools that you're drawing out, right? Okay. Yeah, Rehan.
It might sound like a stupid question, but when you're conducting for so long, how do your arms not get tired?
Whenever I go to a new chiropractor, they always ask me, what do you do for a living? Yeah. So in the summer months, I do less conducting than during the year. So now, of course, all the time, September and October, I'm hurting because this part of your body, right? If it's up, usually when I'm teaching at Cornell, I'm in rehearsal for, just the 2 orchestras, like, about total 8 hours a week, right? Right. So if I'm waving my hands for 8 hours, I'll form muscles, right? So if you're doing a lot of exercise, you will feel it actually, right? So and I've also had many mentors who have back problems, shoulder problems, right? Because they're conducting like opera conductors. They're in the pit for like 3-4 hours, right? So if you're conducting in such a manner, right? Like, I don't know how Schulte survived to his old age. If you look at these videos of Schulte conducting, I mean, he's like Just search on YouTube Schulte Wagner rehearsal, Munich opera. It's like he's going full tilt, like a windmill, right? And the microphone is on his lapel, so you hear me like grunting and screaming. I don't even know how that works. But yes, you got to find ways to be efficient. So, I mean, I think if you're like this all the time, whatever gesture you're doing all the time, you will start hurting. Okay. All right. We didn't quite get to everybody conducting individually, so I'm going to push things a little bit further. Just for 2 minutes, I just want to introduce the German Requiem, the Brahms, which is next on the docket. Okay. I will send you links to the different clips, but there are certain things to work on in this one, right? So far we worked on 3/4s, right, in the Bach and the 4/8. Now this one's in 4/4, a slow 4/4. It's not that long of a clip. It's about 2 minutes, but it's slow, right? So couple things to work on in this, and we're working on a legato beat, right? So this sort of plain ictus point is really important, right? And there are these different kinds of dynamics. We start piano legato, right? And then there are these eddies of crescendos to like measure 9, like here. Wait, can I annotate? I can't annotate, right? So we have that kind of crescendo where we are doing a crescendo for 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then you have this kind of shape where it's a longer shape. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then sometimes you have mixture, right? So it's managing these different eddies of crescendo and decrescendo, right? And then in the second page, now you have more unison dynamics like this, right? And then this. So the thing I would like you to work on is your left hand in this excerpt, right? Where you're trying to show the different kinds of crescendo, decrescendo, the ones that are quite short, like in measure 9 and 10, right? And then ones that are a little bit longer on measure 11 and 12. And then ones like a 21 and 22, where it's pretty much everybody has the same shape dynamic, all right? And at the end. And then more advanced things is this kind of complicated figure at measure 11 or 10. It starts 10, right? So you have this figure, and then overlaps with this figure, and then overlaps with this figure, and then overlaps, right? So one of the advice early in career I got was, if you try to show everything, it's going to actually look very confusing, right? So once again, what is the rule? You show what is needed, right? So if you're hearing the orchestra and the orchestra is doing it, then let them be. But if you hear that somebody is not doing what they're supposed to, then you pay your attention to that, right? So in a moment like this, where you have complicated 3 sets of dynamics, maybe you do every time you do the passage, you do different things. Maybe the first time you show the bass line group. The second time you show the cello group. Maybe in this third time you show the violin group, right? So to be able to do this passage multiple passes and do different kinds of dynamics, right? So you have to practice the 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right? So work on your left hand dynamics on this one, okay? While working on this very legato 4 pattern, slow legato pattern. 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. Any questions? I'll stay on. Yeah.
That we're supposed to be doing for Friday?
So I think I'm going to push everything back 1 class.
Got it.
Okay. right. So the 4A we'll do that on Monday and then record it for due Wednesday, and then Brahms will be pushed back to the next Monday. So we'll always do it in class, and then I'll ask you to record it for my comments. Okay. All right. So until we actually have like each of you conduct at least some portions of it, and I can give you feedback, the recording won't be due. But every time we do it, so we were really supposed to do the 4A in class today with each of you, give you feedback. And then whenever that happens, then you'll do a recording of it and send it to me. Okay. All right. Sounds good. I'm sorry. I keep pushing the schedule back, but I kind of knew this would happen because, I want to make sure that everybody understands the concepts that I'm trying to teach. Okay. But I would rather that I ask questions and clarify things rather than move fast. That's I don't find value in that. I would rather cover less repertoire, and it's okay for me if we don't cover all the repertoire that's in the syllabus, right? I would rather cover repertoire deeply because in some ways, my intent is not to teach a breadth of repertoire to you, but actually give you concepts so that you can you know how to study the repertoire on your own, right? I'm trying to give you the tools on how to fish rather than just give you fish. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Okay. I'll stay on if you have questions, but I'm going to stop recording.